And now to discuss more of the planned protests, we have in the studio human rights activist Usman Hamid from Kontras. So do you think that we have something to worry about for the next 2nd of December rally, as police mentioned the possibility of a subversion attempt?
Well, we do have to be worried. One is because the mass demonstration in November 4 has created what scholars called the most serious political crisis of the Joko Widodo's presidency. And that is a result of not only increasing intolerant groups, but also the split of the political parties in the government and in the parliament. But in relation to the upcoming rally, I guess the huge number of mass mobilization that has taken in November 4 can be repeated in the next December too, which is something to be worried by the government. And I agree. I think the statement of National Police Chief is valid when it comes to deal with one or two groups that has a hidden agenda against Indonesian constitution, against Indonesian democracy. But I do not believe that all protesters in November 4 are the followers of the radicals. I guess most of the demonstrators or most of the protesters at the time were just a regular citizen who expressed their opinions peacefully. And there was one or two groups that advocate violent action, and that is something that needs to be taken firmly by the government, by the police chief. I think if the government is intend to impose subversive law or subversion charges, it has to be careful. I mean, the law has to be clearly implemented. The law has to be well understood by the public, by the government, by every stakeholders, and the law has to be fairly enforced, has to be carefully enforced.
Do you think that the elements of subversive law have been met?
I'm not sure what the government means by subversive. If we look into the law, there are at least three forms of subversion. One is any attempt to kill the president and vice president, and two is any attempt to overthrow the government, the legitimate government, and number three is separatism, to make one region partly or the whole regions to be in the hands of the enemy, of the state enemy. So neither one or two or three has been mentioned by the government, and maybe the government needs to explain that, needs to explain any preliminary evidence or any hard evidence that may convince the public that there is a imminent danger of let's say a violent attempt to overthrow the government or a violent attempt to kill the president and vice president. Otherwise, the government will be accused as politicizing the issue and avoiding public protests on that issues. So again, this is something to be worried, because the mass demonstration in November 4 has created a presidential crisis, and that's the reason why Joko Widodo then have been visiting a number of important figures, special forces in the military, in the armed forces, in the mobile brigade forces, in the police, and the president also invited a number of very prominent figures. And I think the responsibility is not only in the hands of the president, but also all the leaders of political parties, because the case of Ahok on the blasphemy charge cannot be separated from the split of the political parties, from the power struggle over Jakarta gubernatorial election. As we know, 4 of the Jokowi's political parties have decided to support Ahok, and 3 other political parties decide to support Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono's son. And 2 days before the mass rally in November 4, former President Yudhoyono has made a very provocative and a very emotional statement that say, if the state doesn't want to be burned by public outcry, the state has to charge Ahok with blasphemy, something that shows lack of statesmanship, but also political intervention of the politician into the law. And I guess the next mass rally that needs to be worried is any attempt that intend to take the law into their hands by forcing the government to put Ahok into detention, which is undermining the Jakarta gubernatorial election. And according to the law, any legal status of the candidate in running the election at the local level cannot be used to disqualify a candidate, and this is something that needs to be solved politically among political parties, among political leaders.
And that specifically, is that unconstitutional in your opinion?
I think if they want to force the government to speed up the law in arbitrary manner, that's against the Constitution. I mean, Ahok has been named as a suspect, and to make a decision whether someone needs to be arrested or needs to be detained is a very subjective decision of the police, whether the suspect will repeat his allegedly violation of the law, or whether he will obstruct all the evidence, etc. And in this case, I think the police has decided Ahok will not do that kind of thing. So the police let him run the gubernatorial election, and that means Ahok can still run gubernatorial election until he is found guilty by the court, and that means we have to wait the whole process of the law until at least another 3 years.
So do you think like actually the law has been compromised by the authorities naming Ahok as a suspect and promised to report the progress of the case to the National Ulama Council?
Yeah, I think the communication into the Indonesian Ulama Council, Islamic Ulama Council, is very important to communicate that the police has imposed the law carefully, has imposed the law fairly, has imposed the law that is clearly mentioned that Ahok doesn't have to be detained, doesn't have to be arrested, and the MUI, the Islamic Ulama Council, has moral obligation to calm down their followers, or to enlighten public understanding over the issue, and to be more aware of any hidden agenda by a number of groups, or one or two groups, which is known to be radicals, which is known to be advocating violence, advocating hatred, advocating racial and religious hatred, and they have a very bad record of against the law. And now they use the rule of law to expand their power, to expand their influence, and to express their, not to express, but to advocate in a violent manner against democracy, against the rule of law, against the constitution. I think this is maybe something that is worried by the government and is reflected by the National Chief Police.
So seeing how the police handle the situation by forbidding Friday prayer to be held on the streets, but instead of should be held at mosque, and then banning protesters from staging the rally along the main road, do you think that it is actually lawful for them? Can they ban that?
I mean, according to the law, according to the international law on human rights, it is lawful to ban any protest that is undermining public order or public moral or public health. And in this case, the police has to justify their decision to ban the rally based on this. And it doesn't, it is not enough to just say that they are going to disrupt public order, public moral, or constitution and other basic principle of public interest, but also it has to be measured in a very proportionate way, in a very democratic way, that the banning is necessary for democratic society. And the message has to be clear, has to be sent into public so that they understand that this is not the this is not an attack against freedom of expression. This is not any attack or any attempt by the government to undermine their political aspiration. And the government have to find a way how those protesters who genuinely wants to express their peaceful protest against statements of Ahok in a very democratic way, and the government has to make a very firm action against one or two groups which are against the law and which have a hidden agenda to overthrow the constitutional government, or even to change the constitution itself into what they called their anti-democratic ideas like Khilafah and etc.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much,
very
sir, Usman.
Thank you, Abed Ali.
Yes,
Thank you so
we
much.
really